So now I will turn the presentation over to Stephanie.
Yes, thank you very much, Jenny. As Jenny mentioned, my name is Stephanie Strebel. I'm from the Open Science Services at the University Library Zurich. And I'm here today with my colleague Dagmar Jung from the Linguistic Research Infrastructure. And together we are going to give you a brief introduction to the language repository of Switzerland. So Jenny, you can turn the slide. Thank you. So first, a few general details. The Language Repository of Switzerland, or LARS for short, is a domain-specific national platform for the publication of linguistic research data. LARS uses SWISSUbase as its repository system and launched in September of last year, so has been online for roughly 5 months at this point. As you may know, most research funders, including the SNSF, have open data policies and make it mandatory for funded projects to publish their data for reasons of transparency, reproducibility, and data reuse, among others. And LARS is fully compliant with any funder requirements in this regard, and you can archive and publish your data free of charge. Then, as opposed to generic data repositories or all-purpose repositories, LARS has a domain-specific metadata schema that is tailored to the field of linguistics, which allows you to document your data in detail directly on the repository. And this also makes it easier for other researchers to find and reuse your data. As an additional bonus, all data is stored in Switzerland, and this allows you to comply with geographical requirements regarding data protection in case your research project is subject to any. Next slide, please, Jenny. So who can publish data on LARS? If you would like to upload data onto the repository, you need to be affiliated with a Swiss institution of higher education, be it a university of applied sciences, or a university of teacher education. That said, anyone, also researchers from abroad, can access and download data. So the requirement of affiliation with a Swiss institution only concerns data deposit, archiving, and sharing, but not data access. For submissions, we accept data from researchers starting from PhD level who work in the field of linguistics, or from researchers who do interdisciplinary research with a link to linguistics. What is also important to mention is that as a technical requirement to log into the repository and upload data, you need a SWISSEdu ID, but this is something you can register for if you don't have one yet. Next slide. Now, what data can be published? You can just click through the images, thank you. So what data can be published? Basically, you can publish all types of data in file form. This can be text, audio, or video data. Can be images, programming scripts, and so on, as long as the format is suitable for long-term storage, meaning the format should be widely used and, if possible, non-proprietary or open. We don't have specific recommendations for file formats yet, but these will follow in the future. A few conditions apply, though. First, you must comply with data protection and ethical regulations. So if you work with personal or sensitive data, this data has to be anonymized, and data publication needs to be mentioned in the informed consent that was signed by the participants of your study. Second, the data sets have to be complete, and in addition, they have to support the scientific publication, be subject to a publication requirement, or at least have a high reuse value for third parties. And third, we ask you to publish sufficient documentation material that facilitates data reuse. This may include codebooks, README files, metadata documentation, technical instructions, and so on. Something also worth mentioning maybe, please always clarify any intellectual property rights, because you can only deposit data on LARS if you hold the necessary rights to the data. Next slide, Jenny. Now let me tell you a few things about the people involved in LARS. on this slide, you can see that different organizational units are involved in the repository, and together they form the so-called Data Service Unit, or DSU for short. We have several people from the university libraries, that is the University Library Zurich and the Zurich Central Library, or Zentralbibliothek. Then the Linguistic Research Infrastructure, or LIRI for short, which is also based at the University of Zurich, and last but not least, the Claren CH Consortium. Next slide. So when it comes to the distribution of tasks in the DSU, each of the organizational units has its own responsibilities. The two libraries are responsible for the management and coordination of LARS and the DSU. They curate data submitted to the repository, maintain and develop the metadata schema, and perform requirements management. Then LIRI is also involved in data curation and performs technical data checks. They also look at data formats and encoding. And Claren CH takes care of LARS-related communication to the Claren community in Switzerland, as well as establishing working groups on subjects that are relevant for the running of the repository. Over to you, Dagmar.
Thank you. Jenny, could you? Thank you. So just a brief word about LIRI. So LIRI is a technology platform that is the linguistic research infrastructure platform of the University of Zurich. Our objectives are in collaborative research, in dealing with big data, engaging with open access and open science, and also enable data reproducibility. What we offer is language technology, statistical support, machine learning expertise, and also lab space and data acquisition for experimental research and research in the field. Also, we have a background in diverse linguistic subdisciplines, such as neurolinguistics, corpus linguistics, psycholinguistics, descriptive linguistics, digital linguistics, and phonetics. And these are the data types that we can also offer our services and also help depositors for data curation. Next slide, please. So as Stephanie has already explained, the data curation is a joint venture in LARS. The University Library, Central Library, and LIRI all collaborate to do metadata checks, including linguistic metadata. So it is subject specific what we offer. We have added a mandatory metadata block language to the metadata. We look and offer help with the zip file structure that is in data upload and the metadata that belong to these files. We look at file formats, the plausibility of file names, check readability of data, and well, also do some typography, even though that's a minor point, of course. Next slide, please. So there are three key principles in the LARS policy, and one is that data ownership remains with the data depositors. So with you, when you deposit your data, you remain the owner of these data. Second point, what Stephanie just mentioned, or related to that, is that sensitive data cannot be published, and the responsibility lies with the data depositors for this. Of course, we acknowledge that there's different types of data, and we worry with you about data and metadata anonymization. That is, we have to be really careful with regard to personal data and sensitive data. But of course, there's also different licenses that can be used for data publication. And there is a possibility of a closed contract. We are in favor of open data, but we cannot always avoid depositing or making available sensitive data. For this, as Stephanie also already mentioned, we need informed consent. So this is something to the research community that we really want to emphasize, is to make sure that you implement your protocols for informed consent right at the beginning, because that's what's needed if you want to publish here. The larger framework is based on the FAIR principles. So Lars complies with the FAIR principles that you know. So data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And for that, data quality and consistency plays an important role, as well as open file formats that are suitable for long-term archiving, and also sufficient documentation for data reuse. Next slide, please. So we are happy that there's diverse institutions across Switzerland that have started to deposit with us since our launch, as you can see here. So I think it's from north, south, east, and west that have deposited linguistic data. And on the last slide, you see a slightly yellowish picture of most of the people involved in the DSU right now. For more information, please consult the resources, also the specific linguistic resources on SWISSUbase. And that was from our Lars side. Thank you, Jenny.
Okay, thank you, Dagmar and Stephanie. My name is Stefan Bürli. I'm head of the Data Tools and Services at Force and project leader of SWISSUbase. Somehow I cannot forward. Jenny, can you please go to the next slide? Thanks. So SWISSUbase has been developed by a consortium of partners, namely Force, the University of Zurich, and the University of Lausanne. And several other partners are scheduled to join this year and in 2024. SWISSUbase has launched for the social sciences in December 2021, for the linguistics community, as said before, in September of last year. And the University of Lausanne is about to start the pilot phase with several faculties using mostly the general metadata schema. This is an overview of the homepage of SWISSUbase platform, which you will see more of in the demo later on. So what is SWISSUbase? On one hand, it is a technical platform, a flexible platform for the deposit and the archival of Swiss research data for long-term preservation, access, and reuse of high-quality data. And on the other hand, it features services which are mainly focusing on data curation, support, and consultation services direct to the users. It is also worthwhile to mention what SWISSUbase is not. So it is not a deposit and forget data repository where you just dump your data and get a DOI without caring about the reusability of your data in the long run. Secondly, it is not a virtual research environment where you produce data or compute data. And thirdly, it is not a live archive with living data, but it rather comes at the end of the data lifecycle when the collected data is ready to be archived for long-term preservation. The purpose of SWISSUbase was to answer the call for a flexible, national, and multidisciplinary data repository and archiving solution. Secondly, to ensure high-quality data. and rich discipline-specific metadata that allows for future findability and discoverability of your data, and to promote the long-term archiving and reuse of Swiss research data in general. So why use SWISSUbase? Well, there are many features that set SWISSUbase apart from other data deposit and archiving platforms. And some of these include general and discipline-specific metadata fields. We offer a multilingual user interface in English, French, and German, and metadata can be entered in the same 3 languages plus in Italian. The data that you deposit is curated by archiving experts in, at this point, linguistics and the social sciences. We offer personal support and consulting services to the data producers and the data consumers. The data is hosted, as mentioned, on Swiss servers, namely at Switch, to ensure data protection, at least for the geographical aspects of it. And SWISSUbase is totally free of charge for researchers to both deposit and access the data. We also comply with international standards on several levels in terms of data, of course, with the FAIR principles. On the metadata level with DDI for the general schema, as well as the social science metadata schema, and we use MetaShare as a basis for the linguistics metadata schema. On archiving, we are compliant with the OAIS standard, as well as Core Trust Seal certified. At least we've submitted the certification, and it's in process of being attributed to SWISSUbase as well. I would like to give you more specific details about the benefits for the data producers among you who would like to deposit your data. So as mentioned before, it is FAIR and OAIS compliant and of course non-commercial. It allows you to share your data, but also to control or restrict access to your data if needed. So the data can be shared as openly as possible or as restricted as necessary. Then SWISSUbase provides standardized citations as well as DOIs as persistent identifiers for your data to ensure easy and long-term citability. You can also reserve DOIs before publishing your data. So you can already mention it to your funders or to any scientific journals that would like to have a look at the data before it's being published. SWISSUbase also provides download statistics for your data and ensures protection and visibility for your data. And last but not least, it's free for researchers to deposit and access that data and metadata. There are also benefits for those of you who are looking to find, download, and reuse data. Some of these benefits include a large online public catalog with faceted search functionalities, professional human service to assist you in finding and reusing data. You can be assured that the data you find has been checked for quality and reusability. You will be notified by email when new versions of datasets that you've downloaded are available. And we provide, of course, user guides and webinars for guidance. So what's unique about SWISSUbase? Well, you may be wondering what's unique compared to all the other open access repositories and tools. Well, in addition to some of the features already mentioned, what really makes SWISSUbase unique is the personal services available from our team of experts in data management and archiving. And Lars is a living part of SWISSUbase and are there to help you throughout the research lifecycle. Once your data is deposited in SWISSUbase, curation of the data is performed by professional data curators. And I'll give you a few more details on the process in just a moment. As users of SWISSUbase, your data archive service offers live and online trainings, user guides, personal support if you need any help at any point in the data deposit, download, or reuse process. Especially for linguists, the benefits are, well, a discipline-specific repository for data deposit, archiving, and sharing, thus increasing the visibility of your data by DOI persistent identifiers that allow you to cite your data. Linguistic metadata schema based on the MetaShare standard. an expansion of metadata schema to accommodate the needs of the community over time, and disciplinary specialists in the DSUs for data curation and consultation. Now, I would like to give you a few more details about the data deposit process. So this graphic details the full process from data deposit by the producers to data curation by Lars, and then to data consumers accessing the data. So what happens after I deposit my data? I want to focus on what happens now. So once your study, your data set, and your files are submitted, your data curators at Lars will be notified and will begin the archiving process. The data curators will review your study from the perspective of a researcher accessing the data to make sure that the context of the study is clear and that the metadata, data, and documentation are complete. They will ensure that the data is clean, labeled properly, that participant identities are protected, and that the file formats are readable. They work directly with you to ensure that your data set will be findable, understandable, and reusable for future data consumers. So what happens after I deposit my data? The data archive assumes the long-term responsibility of accessibility to your data and will guide you with regards to the optimal file preservation formats, so that even if software changes, the dataset will be readable with newly available softwares. This is not the case in many other common repositories. There is also a versioning process for data curation when updates are made to data, metadata, and documentation that has already been submitted, curated, and published. Lastly, what happens after your data is curated and published by the archive service? Your study data and metadata will be consolidated in a dissemination packet, and it will appear in the SWISSUbase online catalog. As a data producer, you can select exactly the license and access control that fits the level of accessibility to your data that you desire. And as I mentioned before, your data will be visible and accessible on the European level through the Clarin Virtual Language Observatory. And now I will hand over to Stephanie to take you through a short demo of the platform.
Yes, thank you very much, Stefan. So I would now like to give you a quick demo to illustrate some important workflows and features of SWISSUbase, but also some domain-specific features of Lars. So let me just share my screen with you. Can you all see my screen? Good. So yes, quick demo. As mentioned earlier, in order to log in, you need your SWISSEdu ID. Once you've entered your credentials, you can just log in. And you'll be taken directly to your workspace. But before we begin, please just ignore the gray curator bar at the very top. This is not something you would see when you log in with your credentials. So once you're logged in, what you can do is you can edit your account or your profile. You can, for example, add an ORCID ID, or you could subscribe to the newsletter or unsubscribe from the newsletter. Then when you go back to the main page, this takes you to the catalog. Here you can do a free text search and enter any keywords you might be interested in, and have a look at published studies and published data sets on SWISSUbase. You can also apply filters to narrow down your search results, and of course download any data sets you're interested in. Then the My Studies tab. This is basically a summary of all the studies that either you created yourself or that you have been added to as an author. You can also create a new study right here. And for each study, you see the status. You can see whether it's still in editing, whether it's submitted or already has been published. Then the My Downloads tab. This is a summary of everything you've downloaded from SWISSUbase, all the data sets you've downloaded. Again, you have the status for each download. You can check whether it's valid still, whether it's still pending, has been denied, expired, or it has been terminated. So now let's move on to the workspace. And this is, as we saw at the beginning, this is where you first land. And this is also where you have a summary of everything. So you can also edit your profile right here. You have your studies, you have your downloads, and you can create a new study or deposit your data. And for this, you have two options. You can either choose the fast data deposit, which has a nice stepper at the top, which guides you through the process. You can add data to an existing study or just create a new study and deposit your data at the same time. So this is an option that you would choose basically when you have everything ready. You have all of your information, you have your metadata, you have your zip folder, and you're ready to go. But for the sake of time, I'm only going to show you the traditional way, which is to create a new study first. And here you can basically just save your progress at any time and come back to your study or your data set at a later point and keep working on it over time. So to create a new study, the first page looks as follows. You will choose your scientific domain. You will enter a study title, choose the study description language, and you can also already add further authors to your study. Initially, by default, you will be listed as the principal investigator, but this is something you can edit at a later point if this is not true, if this is not the case. So again, for the sake of time, I've prepared a study that we can just go through together. So when we go into the study, you see that you have three levels. You have the study level, you have the datasets level, and the files level. And we will now look at each of these levels individually. So first, the study level. You have an overview of your study here, which you can edit. And in addition to the study title, you can add further institutions to your study, link them to your study. You can add further authors again, or you can edit an author's role, their permissions, or notification status, for example. Then you will choose your main discipline or your main disciplines, and you can also set a start and an end date for your study if you wish. So you see that some fields are marked in red or have a red dot, and these are the mandatory fields. Everything else is optional, but of course feel free to add as much metadata as you like, because the more metadata you add, the easier it is for other researchers to find your data. And always remember, of course, to save your progress up here. Then next you have a general description where you can add information about the time period of your study. You can narrow down the geographical area. You can add an abstract. Then you can add information about the funding you received for your study. This is optional. And also optional, you can add bibliographical references. So these are publications that are based on your study or the data set that you're depositing on Lars or SWISSUbase. And you can just import these bibliographical references by dragging and dropping a RIS file here. This is a file that you will have previously downloaded or exported from Zotero or EndNote, for example. Then let's move on to the next level, the data sets. I've already added a data set. Again, you have an overview with the title of your data set. You can request a DOI at this point, but you can also just leave that. You will be assigned, or the data set will be assigned a DOI automatically when the data set is published. You can add a description. You can choose an embargo date if necessary, if you cannot publish your data immediately. And you will also get, you will also get a standardized, doesn't work, sorry. So you also get a standardized bibliographical citation for your data set. Then next, you can add information about more information about your resource. For example, your resource might be a corpus. You can add a description of that corpus, add keywords. You can also add information about your study participants, if applicable. Then you can read through the deposit contract. This is something you will agree to when you deposit the data set, so you can already have a read right here. And then you will also choose, will be prompted to choose a usage license. In this case, you can edit that. In this case, I've already pre-selected the Creative Commons license, the Creative Commons CC BY license, so Creative Commons attribution license. But you can choose any of the Creative Commons licenses, including the CC0 public domain license. Or you can choose a closed contract if there is a potential disclosure risk. So you can add restrictions, for example, for academic research and teaching only, and you can add special permissions, for example, prior agreement of the author. And you can also see that under each license, you have a short text that explains what exactly this license stands for and what it means. Then let's move on to the last level, which is the file level. So this is where you add your physical file. Again, first you have an overview with the title. You can add information about data anonymization, anonymization remarks. You can add linguistic metadata, which I will show you in more detail in just a few seconds. And this is where your physical file is located. In this case, I uploaded a zip folder. This is actually something we recommend because uploading everything in a zip folder will give the dataset more coherence, let's say. Then for the metadata, this I want to spend a bit more time on because it's specific to Lars and quite important. So you see that I've already added the language metadata block. I've provided more information about the language being studied in my study or my data set. You can edit that as well. And here you can also add further metadata blocks. So the minimum we require is the language metadata block, but you can add further metadata blocks. For example, your annotations, your audio files, your images, and so on. So in my case, maybe let's say I have audio files in my zip folder, and I want to add metadata about these audio files. Here you will be prompted to choose a reference path to specify where exactly in your zip folder these files are located. So you can just choose the path. In my case, let's say these audio files are in folder 1, subfolder 3, and you can validate, and the path will show up here. And then you can add the media type as a mandatory field, and you can also add further optional metadata if you would like, and validate. It will show up here. And of course, you can repeat this process as many times as you like. But yes, once you have everything ready, you're ready to deposit the data set. You can go back to your data set and deposit it. Again, you'll be guided through the process by means of a stepper. You see it's 4 steps. You can click next. And here you see that not all conditions are fulfilled. In this case, we have not submitted the study yet. So let's just update this. Submit the study. Submit. And at this point, we can go back to the data set and try again. Deposit data set. So all conditions are fulfilled now. We are ready to go. Next, can read and accept the deposit contract. And here you see the usage license again that you have chosen, and confirm it and deposit the data set. And this is the point in time where the data service unit will take over. They will curate your data, and in case there is anything that needs changing, updating, or clarifying, correcting, they will get in contact with you.
Great, thank you very much, Stephanie. I will just reshare the presentation for the last slide. If you don't mind to give us the last closing words, Stephanie, and then we'll pass to the Q&A.
Yes. So yeah, so much for the demo. Thank you very much for your attention. A few final words. Here you'll find the SWISSUbase access again on this slide, and you will also find the contact details of SWISSUbase and Lars. So please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And of course, we would of course appreciate it, and feel free to spread the word to your colleagues and let them know about Lars and SWISSUbase. And also, I think Jenny mentioned it at the beginning, a quick heads up, this webinar will be made available as a resource, I think most likely on the linguistics resources page on SWISSUbase. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jenny.
Yes, there, and we will also put it on the YouTube. We have a SWISSUbase YouTube channel that you see here, video tutorials. We will post it here as well, so in the two places.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and all of the speakers.